go ahead and do that and get started. We're a few minutes past, and so we'll jump right in. Thank you all for joining today. I will keep this short, and I want to make sure we get to the discussion, but let me frame up the meeting a little bit. So you are all in your extended terms, and the Secretary's real focus in this during this part of the term is going to be on capital. We'll talk about that, and Steve will moderate some discussion around that shortly. We're also going to have some discussion around the National Innovation Council and next steps with that, since that was also one of the 10 recommendations that you all made in February, and that we've continued to push and nudge forward. And then at the end, I will also talk about next steps for NACIE writ large. This is a council that has been through many iterations, and that means that we'll need to recruit a next set of members from amongst you and your peers and networks. So we'll talk a little bit about how that is going to work going forward after your terms end in November. But before we get to any of that, let me hand it off to Dr. Punch for some introductory remarks before he'll hand it off to Director Vidal. So, Dr. Punch.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome to all of you. I mean, it's truly a delight to connect with all of you back again. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't start off by saying a huge thanks to Steve and Christina for shepherding all of us through all of this with the help of the Commerce staff. I mean, my experience over the last 2 years, it's been tremendous in terms of the kinds of conversations that we've been having. And I just want to say that, the last time that we met when we discussed the report in February as a guidepost for public and private sectors to transform U.S. innovation entrepreneurship over the next decade, really, I mean, that's exceedingly vital and important at this very important moment in time. And NSF is truly committed to that. I just want to highlight a few things that NSF has done aligned with this report, and I just wanted you all to be aware of this. If not already, I just want to give a quick thumbnail versions of that. Earlier this year, I had the pleasure of traveling to North Carolina with the First Lady of the United States to announce the first 2 of the 10 inaugural NSF Regional Innovation Engines focused on regenerative medicine and textile innovation. I mean, just to put this in perspective, as I've said before to all of you, we launched a new technology innovation partnerships directed, of which an exemplar program, among many other programs, was Regional Innovation Engines. And we did the type 1s, which was a smaller investment, but brought together unbelievable communities together, 60 of them all across our nation, every state, every territory involved in that. And essentially place-based innovation being lifted up. It's been truly exciting to watch all of that. And then we launched the type 2s, which were more like a larger scale investment. And these were the 10 regional innovation engines that we launched across the country, and 2 of them in North Carolina around regenerative medicine and textile innovation. And what excites me about this is that we put in $150 million over 2 years, but then we got $350 million broadened by our partners to the tune of $500 million around these 10 regional innovation engines over the first 2 years. And then at full scale, it is going to be $2 billion over the next decade. And we have put out the next set of announcements, and we're hoping that some of the authorizations of the chips and science, the science portion of the chips and science will become a reality so that we can start to scale all of this. Because what I found through this process is there's unbelievable place-based innovation ideas and teams coming together, and there's a time to unleash all of that potential all across our nation. And what has been truly exciting for us is working in partnership with Commerce, EDA, Tech Hubs, and they announced the major investments earlier this year. And I have to say that we were working hand in glove, and that's the way it should be, and that's where we have always envisioned it. And Secretary Raimondo and myself and Secretary Castillo and others all working together in terms of making sure that we are tightly integrating all of the stuff that we do. The other thing that I want to talk about is that we launched the Entrepreneurial Fellowships Program powered by Activate, and we're already supporting 50 fellows. This uniquely expands the Activate model from Berkeley and Boston to every corner of our country as part of Activate Anywhere. So again, on this, we stand ready to scale this effort even further, subject to further appropriations, to create the entrepreneurial core called for in the NACIE report. I just want to make sure that we are making things actionable in terms of the report activities, in addition to the I-Core program, which has launched already thousands of such entrepreneurial activities all across our nation. And just last week, our TIP Directorate published a technology roadmap articulating 4 areas. This is part of what was called for in the Chips and Science Act, that it will stage the first in its attempt to invest in key technologies that will be a lifeblood of US competitiveness in decades to come. Out of the 10 areas that was identified in Chips and Science, we have started to launch on the 4 already of the 10, which are very important for us to advance right away. That report foreshadows a roadmap summit, a major event that we are organizing on December 3rd and 4th in Washington, D.C. Roadmap will be the first ever opportunity for the semi-annual or the seminal place-based investments enabled by the recent historic legislation, Chips and Science, including the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act, and more to come together in terms of all of us working together for the first time. We'll be uniting in this roadmap summit the NSF engines, EDA tech hubs, US Department of Energy hydrogen hubs, and many more. And we'll be bringing together the teams that we have funded with state and local governments, tribal nations, private industry, venture capital, and more. So please bookmark the dates December 3rd, 4th here in DC on your calendars. So as I said, through all of this and more, I just want to express the NSF's strong commitment to building on NACIE's February report and working across the US government to advance the NACIE's recommendations. So we all know that the work is nowhere done near yet. It's just the beginnings, if you want to call it. So this is the time, and I would call it the call for action that we are all working towards, on how each member, all of you, are going to help move forward the recommendations in your own regions, in your own places, and with your own ideas. And this is a time to accelerate at speed and scale. And that's why I'm excited to work with Kathy, Steve, Christina, Assistant Secretary Castillo, Eric, Secretary Graves, and Secretary Armando, all of them, because this requires a team. It takes all of us working together. And I'm so excited that this is truly a partnership and not just put together, but really we're acting as one team. And that makes it very exciting for me. So over to you, Eric. And I think it's over to Kathy now. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, happy to just jump right in, Eric, so you don't have to do another intro. I'm equally enthused. Panch, you could not have said it better, which is always the case. So really appreciate hearing your words. It is about partnership. I love seeing everybody on the video, all the people that we were gathering with at the White House the last time we met. Really looking forward to moving forward and figuring out what are the next steps for NACIE. Eric, thank you for all of your leadership and the work of the EDA. Same thing with Assistant Secretary Alejandro Castillo. Panch, you've been amazing as a co-chair. Christina and Steve, your leadership, your enthusiasm has been phenomenal. And to all the members of NACIE, I just want to thank you for your attendance, your dedication to NACIE, and your willingness to volunteer your time for this important effort. I look forward to our discussion today when it comes to the recommendations and how we're going to tackle the future of NACIE. USPTO, like NSF, is very committed to really creating action out of the plan, and we've been focused on that. I'm also pleased that your terms have all been extended. I don't know if everybody has the same excitement about it, but super happy that all of your terms have been extended until November. This will give us additional time to hone the recommendations for actions, and we can talk today about what's next. I do want to let you know that in parallel with the strategy that we all worked on entrepreneurship, the USPTO and Council for Inclusive Innovation, on which some of you serve, was also in parallel working on a strategy related to innovation. So I will pop that strategy into the chat in a minute when I finish up. The two work hand in hand. They work in tandem to make sure that we're achieving everything we need to achieve when it comes to both innovation and entrepreneurship. I will say that on NACIE, I know right now we're focused on funding, looking forward to having discussions about that, and then also about the potential National Innovation Council. In terms of the USPTO CI squared strategy, it's really based on the life cycle of an innovator from childhood all the way through a successful career and supporting them in innovation and entrepreneurship along the way. So again, they go completely hand in hand. I will say the strategy also lists best practices, so and a lot of what we've done. So if you want to get a detail of all the work the USPTO and other agencies have done to support the work that we're doing, a lot of that is in there. In terms of, I just want to highlight 3 initiatives that I want to point out. One is around data. So the USPTO has launched a diversity information toolkit that helps firms measure their diversity against benchmarks. So I think that's important as we move forward to think about taking a data-driven approach. Number two is, and I believe I mentioned this when we were all at the White House, but we are expanding our footprint across the United States through libraries so we can get out there and give support to people where they are in their communities. And it's not just going to be patent and trademark support, it's going to be innovation and entrepreneurship support. And one thing we have not made public yet, and I guess since this is a public meeting, maybe this is making it public, but one of the things we're also working up on is a startup certification, which plays right into the plan, where we can make sure we educate startups before they get going on everything they need to think about in terms of protecting their innovation, protecting their businesses, so that all the great work that we do comes to fruition. So with that, just thank you all. It's great to be part of this broader team and to know that we're all working together hand in hand.
Phenomenal. Thank you both. We are right on schedule. So let me hand it over to your co-chair, Steve Case, to talk a little bit about coalescing capital.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. And thank you also, Kathy and Ponch, for your remarks and also your continued leadership on this important effort. As just to reframe this, to remind everybody, since we last met, the goal here is how does America continue to lead the world as the most innovative entrepreneurial nation in the world, but do it in a more inclusive way that brings along more people and more places. And the momentum in the past year in particular around tech hubs and the NSF Engine program has really been remarkable. It's gone from a kind of concept on the sidelines around place-based strategies to fuel more innovation, entrepreneurship, drive more economic growth, drive more job growth, and all across the country to really some real action. And so what the Secretary has asked us to do in this next phase of NACIE is to try to put some more meat on the bones, if you will, in terms of how to get more capital into these tech hubs to accelerate and kind of multiply the efforts of the tech hubs. And what we wanted to do today is frame some of the questions that the Commerce team has put together that they're going to send around after this meeting to each of us. And each of us will then, in their own way, using their own networks in their own particular region where they're focused, try to respond to these questions and provide some feedback to Commerce, which will help kind of sharpen the focus in the next few months. So there are 4 questions, and we're not going to answer the questions here. We just wanted to frame the questions and open it up for any discussion. Would anybody suggest positioning them a little bit differently? Maybe there's a question that should be added. Maybe something could be modified to be a little bit clearer. So I'll just read through these 4 questions and give you a chance to reflect on it. The first question is, what tools or information would help investors decide to deploy capital? The second, or how can hubs strengthen their communications with investors to best present investment opportunities? The third is, how might Commerce structure a series of convenings and develop agendas to be most attractive to different investors in different regions? And the fourth is, what are the biggest information gaps for third-party investors? So those 4 questions are designed to tease out, with each member of NACIE in their own way, leveraging their own networks, obviously their own expertise, to try to respond to those 4 questions. And again, they'll be sent out following this call. We just wanted to use the time where we're together for any initial feedback on the questions before they get distributed to everybody. Any thoughts? Going, gone. Last chance to comment before the 4 questions get sent out.
Aziz has raised his hand, so I think go ahead, Aziz.
Okay, good. Looks like he's muted.
Hey, Aziz, we see your hand, but you're still on mute.
Like David as well. Maybe we go to David's question first because he looks like he's unmuted. David?
Hey there, everybody. Nice to see you all. One of my sort of areas of interest is in not just diverse entrepreneurship, but economic models and business models that support a broader range than what traditional financing affords. where sort of the very definition of success in the venture capital industry generally requires losing control of the business for a founder. And so I think there are an increasing number of investors interested in supporting alternative business models, largely from the philanthropic sector. And I think most of them are not plugging into these larger tech innovation kind of conversations because they're still, I think, a pretty small minority of representation there. And so I think to some of these questions you just asked, including communications from the hubs and convenings from commerce, would be to identify opportunities to convene specifically around the topic of kind of deep impact investors or alternative business models, where those investors from those communities can kind of find each other and support and find ways to plug into the hubs, where I think it's easy to get lost in the broader communications and themes.
So I'd be make sure I understand it, sort of trying to bring that impact lens to some of the convening. So there's some are rather than the more general, they're more specific around impact.
Yes, and including alternative funding models, sort of alternatives to venture capital, which
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of employee ownership models or trust-based models, things that are very different than conventional finance, and that has not scaled yet. But I think there's opportunities for commerce to support that.
Great. Other comments? Who's got a bunch of hands up? Is Aziz? I still don't see a microphone on. Why don't we go to Brittany?
Hello. I just want to further bolster David's point about making space for conversations and financial support for alternative capital. Something that I'm really, really excited about and interested in and exploring pretty heavily is the impact of AI on the small business community and the potential for it to create a new class of tech-enabled Black-owned small businesses. And currently, there's a huge gap in terms of from bank loans to venture capital. There's really nothing in the middle, to David's point. And so these are businesses that could scale to be, $1 million plus businesses, to be generational businesses, but there's no financial stack that I'm aware of that's scaled to David's point that would be available to help these businesses scale. So I just want to drive home the point of getting commerce involved in that early so that we can meet the opportunity. And I think that's really going to be the pathway to spurring inclusive entrepreneurship. Moving forward, we're going to see a lot more of those businesses than we are venture backable businesses within this community that I speak of, my community. So I just want to bolster what David was saying and add some additional context there.
Great. Got that, Eric?
I got it. And it also looks like Sin has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the questions, I would use it as an opportunity to ask some of the larger firms what's stopping them, because I think commerce has done an and all of you guys have done an exceptional job getting a very diverse representation of the capital stack on NACIE, but that is a very small, the money that like Brittany and David and I represent is very small compared to Bain or Flybridge. And they're not, they're aware that these areas of these country exist. They just haven't deployed to them. And so if we really want this to be a lasting effort, it needs to be sort of like a diplomatic outreach to the traditional capital stack as well. And so I would use it as a fact-finding mission, because I don't think I can understate sort of how broad the divide is in private equity between people who have the kind of education and care that Brittany has and we have, and a lot of the people on NACIE have, versus how capital is still moving out the door in very traditional structures.
Good point. I also see Kathy, you have something to add?
So I am speaking for Aziz. Apparently, the host has disabled his video and his audio. So if we could get that fixed, that'd be awesome. But I will tell you his question. He says, my question was around getting clarification around the types of investors that are meant to be targeted by the questions. Are we looking for institutional funds, financial sponsors, large corporates, etc.?
Eric, want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. I think the answer, although this like certainly broadens the aperture, is effectively all of those flavors of capital. One of the things that we've learned in engaging with the tech hubs and with engines and other of these regions is that because we're dealing with not just one particular entity with one kind of foreseen growth path, and one set of capital needs, we're dealing with a lot of different entities that might be seeking philanthropic capital. We're seeing early stage companies that might be seeking risk capital. We're seeing later stage companies that might be seeking debt or project financing. And because we're dealing with this kind of conglomeration of entities instead of just a single one, it's really all of those types. I know that makes our ask of you harder, but I'd say, we're asking you to sort of focus on your networks, and the types of capital that you're most familiar with, and that's why we're relying on this whole group and not just single individuals.
All right, see a couple others that have put their hands up. Let's go with Lisa and then Wendy.
Hey, everybody. So to answer some of your questions, I think part of, I heard somebody say recently this saying that really has stuck to my mind, and it was related to how investors right now have some dry capital, not really deploying that dry capital, just kind of sitting on it, dry powder. And somebody said that was because in the past 2 years, entrepreneurs, founders would raise millions and start behaving as if their company was a millionaire or they themselves are millionaires. And what they mean by that is that they started trying a lot of different things that didn't have great ROIs, or marketing schemes that didn't really end up increasing revenue. And at the end of the day, just kind of used a lot of money poorly. And so when I look at my investor pool and my investor peers, we are definitely more cautious about seeing a lot better product market fit. So information, data, proof of product market fit has always been important, and now is critical. So it's not something that sounds really nice on paper, but they haven't really shown it to anybody or actually have some customers. I think some training on really understanding what's driving their ROI and how do you beta test and to make sure that as you're spending your money, you're doing that smartly. And then really some scale up help and validation. That's something that we've seen in our own fund, where the companies assumed that their scale up was going to cost X. And when they actually went to market, the scale up actually cost Y, and really eroded a lot of the margins and left them in a place of needing capital infusions very often, which is a dangerous place to be.
Great. Last one from Wendy, then we'll move to the next topic.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and thanks. It's good to see everyone. What's top of mind based on the questions you put forward is the one about communication to investors, okay? Right here, right now, we're trying to figure out in Colorado how to bring along traditional A and B series investors to understand the growth path of an advanced technology startup. That's not something all of our B2B investors have leaned into, have invested in, and we need them to understand that. So examples are what we're trying to provide, not just from either coast, but in the Midwest too, so they can see it's possible, because they just see it as being very far out and not something they're used to doing. So you have to bring them into examples, and it looks like this here, it looks like that. There's something they're comfortable with, because we need them. We need them to invest, number one. Number two, I think, is around the continuum. And Lisa, I think you reference this, everyone really has, is that some of us that come from a venture-backed world think of, well, you get an angel investor, then you get an early seed, then you get an institutional seed, and off you go. That is not the case these days, for reasons that David, Brittany, and Jennifer have mentioned. And so I'm trying to put together some examples of how all of these different capital providers can come together to ensure a business scales over time. And I think, you know, for many traditional venture folks in particular, they're just not, when you say a non-dilutive grant, they're like, well, why? Like, or if you say like a project loan, like, why? Like, why can't we just make this happen? Well, it's not SaaS. It could be hardware and quantum, and therefore there's a different trajectory, a different kind of capital needs. So those are two different things, the continuum of capital providers. And Eric, I thought the team did a great job of that in DC recently, giving us examples on stage. But I think even more specificity is going to be required to ensure tech hubs are successful, and that we can bring in capital providers that traditionally just look at their investments very specifically. And now we need to broaden their minds around it.
All right, great feedback. We'll adjust the questions based on the feedback and then circulate them hopefully the next few days. So be on the lookout for that, and then try to be obviously responsive, leveraging your networks to get Commerce back as much data as we can, as quickly as we can. The next topic, I'll turn it over to Christina and Kathy to talk about the National Innovation Council.
Great, thanks very much, Steve. You know, as Steve said, we need to own the high growth industries of the future and do it in a more inclusive way. And that means that we also need to support the regional innovation for supply chain, and also for the small businesses that are going to support the high growth industries of the future. So Brittany, what you said is really, really key, is that we've got to make sure that we're diverse geographically and also demographically. So what Ponch is doing with the engines, and Kathy, what you're doing, which I think is marvelous through the library system, is going to be that kind of connective tissue that's going to bring forward the, if you will, web of support for the high growth industries. So how did the National Innovation Council come about? I think in order to energize and engage and rebuild the middle class, which Secretary Raimondo spoke to last night. And she also said, and I think this is something that would be great to quote often and anywhere, is that we need to innovate anywhere with everyone, right? And if we're going to do that, then we need to engage. And the idea is this National Innovation Council would be a cabinet level council, modeled a bit on the Green cabinet, which was during the Obama administration. And this was an idea that bubbled out of NACIE. So thank you all, members, and crystallized, Eric, really with the coffee that you and I had, because you had said this is something that we can actually do from the executive branch and from the agency. So the idea would be that we really would push, and that's one of the reasons it's the first recommendation, is a National Innovation Council where it would be comprised of relevant cabinet members. It would be chaired by the director of OSTP, and would have both the director of the USPTO, as well as the CTO of the country on it. And that way it would engage any agency anywhere that wants to be part of it to help move and drive this entrepreneurial and innovative movement forward. And that's really what the purpose, if you will, in my opinion, is. Love to hear from everyone else. But lastly, I just want to thank NACIE, all the members. I think the report is really important that we've put out. It is something that the question that you'll get from this topic is the following: is which of the recommendations would you want to be part of moving forward under the direction of ED, the Department of Commerce? Because at the end of the day, this is a report to the Secretary, to the Department of Commerce, and we would be interested to know is who it would like to work towards a particular recommendation. So that's the one question you'll get in addition to the 4 from Steve. So I'll turn it over to Kathy. Any additional comments that you want to make? But again, let me just thank everyone, Eric, Pete, all the pillar leaders, everybody who contributed to the report. I think it really turned out well. So,
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Christina. That was really well put. And, you know, obviously you've stressed the need for this council. I just want to give an update on where we are in terms of establishing the council. So right now we're at a stage where we're trying to get buy-in from the White House and figure out the right mechanisms to set it up. One thing that we're going to need to do is to better define the council in terms of where it might live and to show that it's not going to duplicate other councils. As part of that, we also need to think about whether we need an executive order around this. So one council that I think is working extremely well is the council, the President's Council on Competitiveness. That's a cabinet level council. I've attended multiple times, and it's really about thinking about what everybody is leaning in on when it comes to competitiveness and sharing ideas. So if this council could work like that, I think that would be extremely impactful. That said, we are in discussions with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, and the National Economic Council, NEC. And we need to think about with them and sell them on the idea that this is something that's needed and that's not duplicative of work that's already going on, including OSTP's National Science and Technology Council, which also has similar members. So how is this different than that council? We could also think about pivoting. I'm never against pivoting if we can accomplish our objectives, but figuring out how this fits in and how it's not duplicative. One thing we also need to think about is and I'd love input from people on this, is the focus of this council science and technology policy, in which case that leans toward OSTP, or is it economic policy, which leads more to NEC? So I think having some clarity around that will help when we sell this to the White House. And we're going to be having a meeting with Christina and a number of folks on this call with the White House soon to answer questions they have, to explain why this is not duplicative, and to explain where it should live. Jennifer.
Kathy, I would push you hard towards economic policy as someone that's started businesses both in the arts and in tech. Like our first business was a UX design firm, and it was both. And you guys think it's hard to start a tech hub now? Try building, like, poor Christian Siriano is still sewing every day. So, I think it's needed in both, and I would push you to go as broad as possible, because I think if we were crushing entrepreneurship, we wouldn't have needed NACIE in the first place. So I'd go as wide as you can.
Thank you.
That's great.
Any other thoughts or comments?
I'd like to echo what you said. Is I really think more on the economic policy, because I've had the honor and the pleasure to work with Oren as an executive in residence at Columbia, and I think there are a lot of opportunities. And I would say many of the companies that are coming out of universities are more science and tech, but there's a gap there between what you need to know in order to solve a problem and what you need to know to scale it and have it become a high growth industry of the future, or a medium growth industry of the future, or support the supply chain. And so that's that education piece that I think could then be disseminated through some of the networks that are being set up, like you talked about, Kathy, and you talked about Punch too. So that would be, my perspective as well. I probably shouldn't have weighed in since I'm co-chair. Sorry, y'all. Oops.
Well, I will say I agree as well, and I know I probably shouldn't weigh in as well. But if anybody has differing views, let us know. From our position as the USPTO, I think we're doing a decent job incentivizing people to innovate. It's really that next step that we need to focus on, right? That's really what NACIE is focused on. The ideas are great, but how do you use those ideas to create jobs, to lift communities? That's really where we need to go with it. And the added benefit of that is we don't have a council that's focused on that. So it would not be duplicative of what OSTP is doing.
Well, I think the only other thing, again, here I am weighing in, but it's really thinking about one of the other recommendations that I thought was brilliant and came out of the Moonshot group was, creating the NINE, this National Innovation Network. And so if you want to innovate in a particular area, you want to start a company, where do you go, right? If you could just get on to one place and they actually would have the AI intelligence to generate a path for you, your idea, where to get capital, where to get support, where to hire people, et cetera. I think that would be very powerful. So I see these ideas feeding into each other and creating this web of innovation.
So I would just add, these are all excellent points. What I would like to add is it is not NEC or OSTP or versus OSTP. this has got to be jointly done by NEC and OSTP because there are science and technology components to that and workforce components to that, and as well as NEC. So I would strongly encourage us to think about it in that form because we do a lot of things with NSC and OSTP on national security related activities. This is economic security related activities. That's how I want us to think about it and not think about whether it is this or that. So I just want to put that out there.
Any other questions or for Kathy or for on this topic? Great. We'll turn it back. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, please, please.
All right. Well, we will include this as one of the questions as well. Additional kind of thoughts around this, and would love to get your input as Christine and Kathy and others push this forward. Let's go ahead and move on to our last topic, which is the next class of NACIE. So a couple updates on this front. First, I will say that we are going to move to a new structure for NACIE appointments. As you all know, currently all of you serve the same exact term. And so we get the benefit of celebrating a new class every few years. But we have the challenge of having to go through a kind of full recruitment and replacement of the whole council. And it gives us a little bit of kind of lumpiness and ability to convene and rely on the council and have continuity there. So as many other councils are structured, I think including Ponch's National Science Board, we're going to move to a model where basically a third of the council joins every year and a third of the council graduates. So we'll always stay at 30 members, but there will be a kind of a refresh of 10 slots every year. So we'll start that new model with this next recruitment. So just as you all are thinking about whether or not perhaps to continue your service, which we're very grateful for and would continue to be grateful for, or if you're thinking about other folks in your network, that's just sort of a change in how the council will work going forward. Speaking of you all as members and your networks and peers, the other thing that we rely on always is our network of NACIE alumni and current members in order to identify the folks who we should have on the next iteration of the council. And so I know that these discussions often take a while. The recruitment process actually extends for a reasonably long time. We want to make sure that we have folks who, just like all of you, are providing incredibly impactful and relevant advice. So we'll include these in our questions out to you all as well in a different section, but there are a few things that we'd like you to start thinking about. One is if you're interested in continuing on in a new version of NACIE. I think we've always had some alumni continue on, and I think that's really good value, especially in the current model, to have some of that continuity and knowledge about how government works. So please start thinking about that. We also are going to be actively recruiting. So we want to get the word out. So if you've got friends, colleagues, peers, acquaintances, other folks in your network who have expressed interest in NACIE or who you think would be a great addition to this board, we'd love you to start talking to those folks now about what this is and what's involved and maybe getting a sense of whether or not they would be interested. And then the last thing that I'll say on this is that we will begin this process and start taking in applications and nominations publicly sometime in the coming months. Understanding that there are sort of externalities that we're going to have to navigate, but we want to make sure that we're setting up the council again for continuity and continued success so that we have a ready roster of folks to rely on for advice as we continue on our work. So that is the quick update there. More to come in the questions, but I see Oren, you've got your hand up. So yeah, jump in.
Sure. Just quick question on that. Are you looking for us to kind of go spearfishing and find like here are two people we think would be perfect? Or are you hoping that we sort of leverage our broader channels to spread the word about, which sort of have the dual purpose of both getting people we may not think of, and also spreading the word about how great NACIE is and what a great opportunity this has been? And if the latter, it would be really helpful to get like the blurb that we can then just copy and paste into LinkedIn with something fuzzy at the beginning.
Yeah. So the latter will definitely happen, and we will definitely get you the blurb because we do want to get the word out broadly. We want to make sure that membership is really inclusive as possible. That said, we also, we rely on you and other folks to identify people who have really powerful opinions and the ability to really provide meaningful input and meaningful perspectives that we might otherwise be lacking. So if you have some folks that you really think would be excellent, I think we'd like you to target them and also let us know as well, as we take in a lot of different inputs in the process of ultimately deciding on who gets appointed to the board. Any other questions on that? Right. We did, I believe, Pete, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we got one public comment that was delivered electronically because the member of the public could not be present at this time. So we will send that out to you all as a public comment, and it will also be available to folks who requested, since it is part of this meeting, but we won't run through it live here since that member of the public was not available. So that actually brings us to the end of the meeting. And I want to thank you all again for your continued service. Like Steve said, we will get these questions out to you soon, and we will also give a reasonable but also not too far out due date for initial round of responses, so that we can take in those inputs and see what's going to happen next with respect to Capital, the National Innovation Council, and the recruitment process. So with that, unless any of my esteemed co-chairs have any final remarks.
No, just thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the summer and be watching for that email and hopefully respond promptly and fully.
Exactly. Thank you,
you all.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.